In 1850, if you were a laborer in London, the most lethal weapon aimed at your life wasn't a revolver in a dark alley. It was the fluffy white loaf of bread sitting on your breakfast table. For modern Americans, bread is a simple staple, a background player in a balanced meal. But in Victorian London, bread was your entire world, and that world was being constructed out of industrial waste and human remains. You weren't just eating to survive, you were participating in a grim chemical experiment where the daily bread was a slow-acting poison, engineered to turn a profit at the cost of your bone marrow. The disturbing truth about the Victorian breakfast begins with the color of the loaf. In the social hierarchy of London, white bread was the ultimate status symbol. It suggested refinement, purity, and wealth. However, wheat was expensive, and the milling processes of the time were imperfect, resulting in a grayish, coarse flour.
To satisfy the insatiable demand for pure white bread, bakers turned to a terrifying list of additives. The most common was alum, a metallic salt used today in leather tanning and fire extinguishers. When mixed with low-grade flour, alum performed a miracle. It bleached the dough to a snowy white and allowed it to hold more water, making the loaf heavier and, consequently, more profitable. But alum was just the beginning of this culinary descent into hell. As greed intensified, the additives became more grotesque. To give the bread bulk and that desired crunch, some bakers turned to ground-up bones. While the idea of bone bread sounds like something out of a horror fairy tale, for the London poor, it was a constant and well-founded suspicion. Bones were cheap, they turned white when powdered, and they added significant weight to the merchandise. In a city where absolutely nothing went to waste, the source of these bones was often questionable.
Whether they were scraps from local butcher shops or, as many whispered, in damp taverns, bones harvested from the city's overflowing shallow graveyards, the result was the same. You were literally consuming the dead to try and survive the present. The ritual of the Victorian breakfast was a study in deception. A father would sit in his cramped kitchen, slicing a loaf that looked perfect, white, firm, and attractive. He would feed his children unaware that the alum was slowly destroying their digestive tracts, leading to chronic constipation and wasting diseases. That bread didn't nourish, it sat in the stomach like a lead weight. For the children of the London slums, this adulterated bread was a direct cause of rickets and stunted growth. They were being filled with minerals and substances their bodies couldn't process, all so a baker could save a few pennies on a sack of wheat.
The fraud didn't stop at the crust. To cut costs even further, bakers mixed the flour with chalk, plaster of Paris, and even pipe clay. Imagine biting into a sandwich today and realizing the bread is actually 20% construction material. This wasn't a hidden conspiracy, it was an open secret. Medical journals of the time, like The Lancet, began running exposés on death in the pot, revealing that the average Londoner was consuming a chemical cocktail every single morning. Yet, for the manual laborer, there was no alternative. You couldn't grow your own wheat in a tenement, and you couldn't afford the honest bread sold in the luxurious West End. The air inside these bakeries was as toxic as the dough itself. Most Victorian bakeries were located in damp, unventilated basements directly below street level. As you walked to work, you were stepping on the ceiling of the room where your breakfast was being prepared.
Cobwebs hung from the rafters, dropping directly into the kneading troughs. Rats, attracted by the grain, scurried over the fresh dough. The bakers themselves, suffering from baker's itch or respiratory diseases from inhaling alum dust, sweated over the mixture. This wasn't the artisanal, rusted bakery of your imagination. It was a subterranean factory of filth and disease. For a modern observer, the horror lies not just in the ingredients, but in the normalization of this dietary violence. People knew the bread was doctored, but they had lost the ability to recognize the taste of real food. When pure bread was finally mandated by law later in the century, many Londoners actually complained that it tasted strange or was too dark. Their palates had been colonized by the very toxins that were shortening their lives. They preferred the white chalk bread to nutritious whole wheat bread because whiteness was what they associated with civilization.
The bread industry in London operated like a poisoning cartel. If a baker tried to sell pure bread, he would have to charge double and would see his shop go bankrupt in weeks.
Economic pressure forced even well-intentioned men to become accomplices to the bone bread. It was a system designed to grind down human dignity until only dust remained. The psychological impact of this food terror was a constant background noise. The fear of being poisoned by your own food created a paranoid society where every meal was a gamble against mortality.
This era of adulterated bread serves as a chilling reminder of what happens when profit is prioritized over human life without any oversight. The British Empire was expanding across the globe, powered by a population that was being slowly hollowed out from within. The miserable sleep on a two-penny rope was followed by a breakfast of bleached bone and plaster. It was a cycle of degradation that started at the table and ended in a shallow, premature grave. Victorian sophistication was merely a facade of sugar and alum. Behind the silk dresses and polished carriages was an army of workers whose bones were literally being swapped for chalk. History often focuses on the great scientific discoveries of the time, but it ignores that the most applied science in 1850 was the chemistry of food fraud. Bread wasn't just food, it was the fuel for an industrial machine that didn't care if its human parts were brittle and diseased, as long as they kept working.
The truth about London streets and the food that circulated in them is that life was worth less than the filler material used in the bakeries. White bread was the greatest lie of the 19th century. It promised health and status, but delivered malnutrition and death. Looking back, we see a society that ruled the seas, but couldn't guarantee that a child could eat a slice of bread without ingesting graveyard remains or tannery waste. Ultimately, London in 1850 was a city devouring itself. Breakfast was not a moment of family bonding. It was the start of another day of survival in an environment that wanted to extract every drop of utility from you before returning you to the earth, possibly to be mined by another baker a few years later. The cycle of bone bread was the perfect metaphor for Victorian capitalism, a system that turned death itself into a fast-moving consumer product. Don't be fooled by period dramas showing bountiful tables and golden loaves coming out of the oven.
Reality had the sour smell of spoiled yeast and the gritty texture of chalk. Eating was an act of bravery, and surviving breakfast was the first great victory of the day in a city that never stopped chewing on its own children.
By the time the sun set over the Thames, thousands would be returning to their coffin beds, their stomachs full of plaster and their lungs full of coal dust. The British Empire was the wealthiest on earth, but its foundation was built on the backs of people who were quite literally crumbling from the inside out. The white bread wasn't a symbol of purity. It was the white flag of a population surrendering their health to the altar of the free market. So next time you toast a slice of bread, remember the basements of London. Remember the alum, the chalk, and the silent grinding mills that turned the dead into a meal for the living. The golden age was white powdered, but beneath that surface lay a reality so dark, it's a miracle anyone survived to tell the tale. The Victorian breakfast wasn't a meal, it was a sentence.